repression here is what we'll touch on. The concept behind repression supposes that we inhibit our true selves for fear of being socially ostracized. Repression is one of the most famous Freudian defenses and is central to understanding psychoanalytic theory. Psychoanalytic theory, for the purposes of discussing repression, is a theory exploring the conscious and the unconscious of the human psyche. The human psyche here is composed of the two states, the conscious and the unconscious, which I acknowledged in my prior video, and understanding how innate and biological drives kind of are essential to psychoanalytic theory, and it's drive theory. Freudian theory touches on drive theory, meaning that if you think about Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that you start with the most basic, like food, water, and sex, and then you move up to something like safety and shelter, and then you keep moving up to belongingness and love. And anyways, the theory here talks about drive theory, meaning that when those lower level functions aren't met or aren't satisfied, that humans will act to fulfill those, and that's what our unconscious sort of gravitates to. And then repression, tying into this, psychoanalytic theory has many tenets, and the discussion and acknowledgement of the unconscious is certainly paramount in explaining repression. Freud thought that humans were instinctively driven by sex and aggression, like I talked about with drives, basic drives. The idea of the unconscious was actually groundbreaking at the time due to its esoteric relationship with the conscious mind. How can we analyze things that are not processed in our awareness? So unconscious, we know about the conscious, that's our lived experience, but Freud's like, no, we have an unconscious. Therefore, it was a little shaky at the time. It was breaking some new ground. How is repression an abatement of our natural drives? And so how does repression sort of slow down or suppress our natural drives? Like, why do we do that to basic drives? And how is this so natural if we don't even process it in our awareness? That makes a lot of sense, just chewing on that for a second. How can we say that this is a drive if we're not even aware of it? And how can we say it's natural if we're not even aware of it? And if we're not aware of it, then how is it even presenting in our body? How is it acting out? Does it make sense? More concretely put, suppose you are seeing a client who is chronically sick and reporting flu-like symptoms for most of the year. If the client is not actually sick, why would they feign such an inconvenient ailment in their life? So psychoanalytic theory might suppose that the client suffered a harm during psychosexual development. This is why people say Freud's all about sex. Everything, all his theory. Thing that my professor said that, it's not all about sex. Sex doesn't account for everything, like Freud would say. So sex doesn't account for everything, but sex doesn't also account for nothing. These drives, these principles that he was talking about in psychoanalytic theory, they have merit, that we do need to satisfy some basic drives, and the sex is very important in the way that humans interact with one another. And taking like a anthropology view on this, it's all competition to produce and to keep your species in survival, keep pay it forward. So there are lots of intersecting ideologies with drive theory and psychosexual theory. But going back to the patient who's feigning illness, psychoanalytic theory might suppose that the client has suffered a harm during psychosexual development. Psychosexual development asserts that people must mature through stages of development: oral, anal, phallic, latent, genital. These are the 5 stages of psychosexual development in order to mature and function normally. And once you mature through all of these, then you can be a normal person. The client who is feigning chronic illness must have never fully graduated from one stage or another, and is now repressing a biological urge that longs to be fulfilled. We will suppose then the client enjoys the attention, care, and coddling that is typically received from others when they hear of a friend who becomes ill. All the attention and care is delivered to the sick person, and it is socially acceptable for one to be cared for when they are sick. But this sort of dependent behavior is not socially acceptable outrightly in the day to day life. Therefore, repression is seen as an adaptive function that allows the client to fulfill some sort of developmental, biologically imperative need that was never or inadequately met. Thus, if one of those phases, the oral, anal, genital, latent, phallic, if one of those was disrupted, and then in your normal development, then you're not normal because you had this harm. Maybe you have this mistrust of your mother because the breastfeeding stage did not go so well. So therefore, you have an oral fixation, and that's why you're a smoker. That's kind of how Freud pieces these things together. The person who's always sick might have had a harm to one of those psychosexual stages of development and is now trying to repress it and do it in a socially acceptable way, because the unconsciously they don't understand that they need to be cared for. They don't understand that basic drive, that biological need that was harmed early in development. Therefore, they don't know why they're always sick, and they're seeing the psychologist, and the psychologist might have a theory that, hey, you're not always sick, you just like to be babied and you don't want to say it. So repression can also exist adaptively as a negative feedback loop. Okay, what does that mean? The removal of a negative stimulus often elicits the increase in behavior. That's negative feedback. So if you're taking away something bad, you're more likely to feel good. And since you want to feel good, that's going to happen more and more because you're going to be chasing that good feeling. So let's get rid of the bad, increase the good over and over. And that's a feedback loop. Repressing a socially unacceptable thing, so might reduce the anxiety, the guilt, the shame, and the stress one feels about their wishing or desiring of the thing. If a client is stressed about something, repression abates this associated stress, which allows the client to operate normally. So you're lifting off the stress by repressing it, and then you can function normally. Therefore, repression, this thing that we sound so bad, is like, you're repressing your feelings, it's so bad for you. Actually, I would argue that repression here, after studying psychoanalytic theory, is positive. It's a positive thing because it becomes adaptive, meaning it helps you get by your day to day because you don't have to worry about this thing that's been bothering you, it's been holding you back, that causes you stress. You don't have to say, hey man, I just need to be coddled all the time. You don't have to do that because you'd be embarrassed and you'd be stressed and you'd be anxious about what other people would think of you if you admitted this outrightly. Therefore, you repress it, but sometimes or oftentimes it comes out one way or another, and that's where these patients end up in front of us. But it is adaptive to them because it helps them cope in a way. But only then years later do they see a psychotherapist who helps them work out this unconscious desire. So if a client is stressed about something, it's a base of stress, we read that, helps them get by on their day-to-day, the unconscious wish or desire may then be inhibited by repression and help the client improve functioning. This cascade operates in a cyclical manner, therefore creating a loop of reward and adaptability, like I was saying. However, it is also essential to note that since these unconscious wishes are based on biological drives or harms, so based off of something you want or something that was disrupted in the psychosexual phase to psychosexual development, they never fully extinguish. They are merely placated by the concept of repression. Thus, you can work on this in psychotherapy. Maybe you are given some kind of interpretation by the analyst, and then you introspect on that. You shine your view of consciousness into this little spot in your unconscious that you've never really considered before. You think, hey, maybe the analyst is correct, and then you start to make changes and improve your life. However, this argument says that it never fully extinguishes because all these harms, all these ailments are based off of drive theory. And your essential drives that I was talking about, the little hierarchy of the bottom part of it, that's part of being human. Part of being human is like, think about the hypothalamus, for example, the F's, right? like food, fucking, friends. Like think about the things that make you human. They're never fully going to extinguish. So although you might recognize it, you're not. It's not going to be fully cured because you'll always have the need for like food, water, reproduction, friends, security, all that stuff.